Welcome back. In the last session, we looked at the temptation narrative and the programmatic text of Jesus in the synagogue at Nazareth. We mentioned that this text gives the program for the entire Gospel of Luke. In this session, we will continue our look at chapter 4 of the Gospel of Luke, with the narrative of the cure of the demoniac. Following that, we will examine the cure of Peter's mother-in-law. This will lead us to a discussion of the Lucan version of the call of the first disciples, followed by the narrative of a cure of a leper. These will elicit official reaction to the ministry of Jesus, which takes the form of opposition. That will be framed by Luke in 5 units. We shall end our session with the first of those 5 units, the cure of a paralytic. The scene now changes from Nazareth to Capernaum, which is described as a city of Galilee. Capernaum is literally Kafar, village of Nahum. It was a fishing town on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, which had some prominence at the time. Since the people of Jesus' own hometown, Nazareth, were so unreceptive to his ministry, Jesus establishes the base of his operations in the small village of Capernaum. Seemingly, in contrast to Nazareth, Jesus was teaching, and all who heard him were amazed at his teaching. The reason was that his speech had authority, exousia. This is authority with the root meaning of the term, which comes from 2 Greek words, ex meaning out of, and ousia, which means being. Therefore, to teach with authority is to teach out of one's being. This teaching is not something which Jesus hands on or that he had read. Rather, it comes from the depths of who he is. This is a lesson that's very good for us to hear. Our word, our speech, is much more believable if one can sense that it is coming from the depths of who we are. Following this transition, there are 2 narratives of cures that Jesus performs. The first is the cure of a demoniac, a man possessed by a demon, in the synagogue at Capernaum. The second is the cure of Peter's mother-in-law. This is followed by a summary statement of the general cures that Jesus does in the area. This is a general view of the site at Capernaum. You can see that there is much left to be excavated in this area. The red domes to the left of the picture are the Orthodox Church of St. Peter in Capernaum. And if you look far beyond the picture, you can barely see the Sea of Galilee. This is an aerial view of the area of excavation in Capernaum. The bright building toward the bottom is the synagogue. You can see the synagogue main room in the lower center, then one of the lesser rooms to the left. Now we move a little closer to see the remains of the excavations of the first century houses in Capernaum. The black basalt bases show that they were on the level of the first century. Next to the remains of the first century houses are the remains of the synagogue in Capernaum. It is speculated by archaeologists that these remains are not the synagogue where Jesus preached, but rather a 3rd or 4th century synagogue which was built on top of the remains of the synagogue where Jesus preached. As one enters the synagogue, you can look along the outside wall and see lighter brick of the current synagogue on top of the black basalt, which many speculate would have been the synagogue of Jesus' day. We see here a view of the front of the synagogue. The pillars would be the support for the ceiling. In the wall behind the pillars, some blocked by the pillars, would have been a niche for the Torah ark, which we saw in the synagogue at Nazareth. Above would be a balcony for the women. Only men were allowed on the floor level of the synagogue. And finally, we have a picture showing the small ledge along the sides of the synagogue beyond the pillars to allow some elderly to be seated, and then beyond them are some of the storage rooms of the synagogue. Now let's take a look at those two cures that Luke narrates. Most would agree that Luke received these two narratives from the Gospel of Mark. The first begins with the location of the cure, in the synagogue. Then the subject of the cure is introduced. There was a man with an unclean spirit, who cried with loud voice, questioning what it is that Jesus was going to do. In the original Greek, the dialogue with the demon begins with an ea, which may be a simple interjection of surprise or displeasure. Aha! Or it could be an imperative of the verb eao, which could be translated, leave us alone. In either case, the demon senses that this encounter will not have good results. Have you come to destroy us? The demon asks. The demon then shows that he knows who he is dealing with. I know who you are, the Holy One of God. In the ancient world, knowing who someone was, that is, their name, was a means of gaining power over a person. So the exclamation of the demon may be a futile means of showing that he thinks he has power over Jesus. Luke has a telling juxtaposition here. The unclean demon is calling Jesus the Holy One of God. Talk about the meaning of opposites. To this demonstration of fear and knowledge, Jesus replies by rebuking the demon. Be silent and come out of him. The term rebuke, or epitimao, in Judaism was a technical term which referred to a command that brought evil powers into submission. Thus Jesus demonstrates his power to silence demons and bring them under his control. The demon does not give up easily. Rather, he throws the man down in the midst of those in the synagogue, and then comes out of the man, doing no harm to the man. The reaction of those in the synagogue was amazement. Fear or astonishment came over all, and they question what they have just experienced. What sort of speech is this? This man commands unclean spirits with authority and power, and they come out. Jesus has demonstrated that his defeat of Satan in the temptation narrative was not a fluke. Rather, he will now proceed to defeat Satan on all fronts, beginning with subduing the very minions of Satan himself, the unclean spirits. This brings amazement to all who witness it, but also a certain awesome reverence for the one who subdues the demons. The narrative ends with a comment that the report of what had happened went out to every place throughout the region. Jesus' fame is spreading. The scene now switches from the synagogue to the house of Simon, which was in Capernaum, just a short way from the synagogue. Today in Capernaum there is a church built in honor of St. Peter over the site of what many believe to have been the house of Simon. This is a picture of the Church of St. Peter. It is a somewhat modern building which has a significant amount of woodworking inside of it. Around the sides of the original church are wood carvings of the various key moments of the life of Jesus. This is the foundation of a 4th century baptismal area, which was said to have been built over the house of Peter. We can tell that it's baptismal because of the octagonal shape of the baptistry. This picture shows another view of the octagonal baptistry, but if one looks closely under it, you can see the foundation of the first century house, which many feel was the house of Peter. Luke introduces the subject of the narrative simply. Simon's mother-in-law was ill with a high fever. Simon and those in the house request that Jesus do something to heal her. Jesus' response is simple and quick. Standing over her, he rebukes the fever, and it left her. Note the use of the verb rebuke in regards to the fever. Another form of the power of the devil was sickness, and so Jesus brings the fever of Peter's mother-in-law into check by rebuking it. Thus, Jesus shows that he has power over physical maladies in this text. Arnold puts it well in his commentary. Jesus' rebuke is meant rather to demonstrate his authoritative power over all illness. Disease, like demoniac oppression, is part of the evil fallen world that Jesus came to save. The proof that she has been cured is the fact that she now rises from her sick bed and waits on them. Following these two miracles, Luke inserts what is known as a summary statement, which generalizes what he has just narrated. As the day goes on, the word of Jesus' cures spreads rapidly throughout the region, so rapidly that by sunset, people who have sick with them are bringing them to him. Jesus' response to this is to lay hands on the sick and to heal them. His healing ministry has significantly expanded in the course of one day. As with the demoniac in the synagogue, many of the demons Jesus expelled came out of the possessed crying, "You are the Son of God." Jesus rebuked them and does not allow them to speak because they knew who he was, the Christ. Note that the Son of God, here the Holy One of God, in the earlier narrative, are both titles for the Messiah. At the end of the day, Luke tells us that Jesus departed and went to a lonely place, an eremon topon in Greek. Eremos in Greek means wilderness or desert, and so it is a desert place. Noland remarks that for Luke, the wilderness is a way station, a place of waiting in preparation for the next stage. But the people would not allow him to get away. In Luke's terms, they sought him and came to him and would have kept him from leaving them. In other words, they want to have this healer to themselves. But that's not the plan of God. As we saw from the narrative in the synagogue of Nazareth, Jesus was not sent to a particular district. He was sent for all. Therefore, it's necessary that Jesus move on and preach the good news of the kingdom to other cities. Luke has Jesus reiterate, "I was sent for this purpose." And so the unit ends with Jesus preaching in the synagogues of Judea. The reference to Judea is somewhat peculiar, since everything we have been discussing thus far has taken place in Galilee. Luke uses Judea to refer to the whole of Jewish Palestine, and so the preaching in Judea may simply mean that Jesus must move through the whole of Palestine with his preaching. We turn now to a widening of the ministry of Jesus through the addition of co-workers in the mission. Jesus calls a number of disciples from the followers that have been with him from the beginning of his ministry. The scene can be structured as follows. Number 1, a general introduction found in Luke 5:1, followed by number 2, a particular introduction which sets the scene in Luke 5:2-3. Number 3, a miracle that leads to the call of the followers in Luke 5:4-10. And finally, the miracle. After the miracle, the actual call to follow in Luke 5b, 10 to 11. The general introduction is very simple, but it expresses the popularity that has been growing through these chapters. Crowds are pressing upon Jesus to hear the word that he speaks. Then the locale of this pressing is given, the Lake of Gennesaret. This is a new geographical term for the Gospel of Luke. It comes from the name of the district where the lake is located, Gennesaret, or Chinnereth, which is mentioned in 1 Maccabees 11:67. It is actually another name for the Sea of Galilee, which is the source of the fish that are so key to the fishing industry of James and John and their father Zebedee, and also Simon and Andrew. This is a map of the major portion of Galilee with the eastern regions of Gaulonitis and the Decapolis, or the district of the 10 cities. In the center of the map, one can see the Sea of Galilee, which is also known as the Lake of Gennesaret. At the upper tip of the Sea of Galilee is the town of Bethsaida, which is the hometown of Peter and Andrew. They have since moved to Capernaum, which is located on the shores of the sea, a little to the south and west of Bethsaida. This is a picture taken from a boat sailing on the Sea of Galilee. As you can see, the shore is not far distant. The actual dimensions of the Sea of Galilee are 14 miles north to south and 7 miles east to west. Due to climatic conditions, these dimensions are becoming slightly smaller every year. Also, you can see that the sea is surrounded by high hills. This causes the wind to swoop down during storms and makes the sea a very treacherous place. This picture shows the serenity of the Sea of Galilee when all is good and all is calm and the weather is good. And yet another view of the Sea of Galilee, this one is one of the places where Jesus sought peace and serenity. Along the shores of the Lake of Gennesaret, Jesus sees 2 boats, where the fishermen were washing their nets after a night of fishing. Jesus gets into one of the boats, which Luke tells us belonged to Simon, and asks him to put out a little from the land. The purpose of this was twofold. Jesus wished to satisfy the hunger of the people pressing upon him on the shore for the word of God. However, it was necessary that he get some distance between him and the people so that they could first of all see him, and secondly, and more importantly, hear him. He asks Peter to go out a bit, to row out a bit onto the lake. Further, the water will act as a soundboard, which will throw his spoken words back to the people on the shore. It is akin to a first-century PA system. Jesus then sits down in Simon's boat and teaches the people. It is to be noted that sitting is the teaching position of the rabbi. Here is a picture of 2 fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. You can see that they're working on the net that they use for catching fish. The large semicircle that you see is the full extent of the net which is used. This is a good picture of the net that would be used for fishing in the Sea of Galilee. It is possible that this fisherman is cleaning his net after fishing. When commencing to fish, the fisherman would gather his net and throw it out onto the sea, forming a circle, and it would entrap the fish within that circle. After a sufficient period of time, the net and the fish would be dragged in. Upon finishing his teaching, Jesus tells Simon to put out into the deep and let down his nets for a catch. The presumption is that Simon was cleaning his nets all night because they had been out all night unsuccessfully. So Jesus, with a rabbi's command, would test Simon Simon's fisherman's experience. Who will win? Simon responds exactly as one would have thought. Master, we've been out all night and caught nothing. Will Simon's experience with his mother-in-law influence his actions here? Seemingly it does. Simon addresses Jesus with the title Master, in Greek epistata, which implies a recognition of Jesus' authority. But at your word, I will let down the nets, he says. Simon is willing to swallow his pride and take the word of a rabbi. The result is amazing. The nets took in a great number of fish, to the point that the nets were breaking. There was clearly a need for assistance, and so Simon and those on their boat signal for their business partners to come for assistance. They come, and both boats are filled to the point of sinking. The overall impression given by these two verses was that this was a catch of fish exceeding almost any they had ever experienced. Note also that Simon is not a lone fisherman. He has workers with him, and he is in partnership with others. Later, we will discover that these others were James and John, the sons of Zebedee. This is a professional fishing business. When narrating Simon's reaction to what has just occurred, Luke uses the double name Simon Peter. Since the area had been under Greek control for so long, it became common for people to have two names, one from their Jewish heritage, in this case Simon, and another from the Greco-Roman world, here Peter. In many biblical narratives, the double name was introduced through a change of name, as Luke will mention in 6:14, Simon, whom he named Peter. Now, Simon's response was to fall at the knees of Jesus, a sign of homage. Many interpreters see this reaction of Peter as an acknowledgement of the fact that he is in the presence of the divine. That would be confirmed by his statement, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." The word for Lord that Simon Peter uses here is kurios, which is the Greek translation used for the divine name in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures. It is Simon's acknowledgement that what he has just experienced is an experience of God acting in Jesus and in his deeds, both here and in the cure of Peter's mother-in-law above. Luke notes that Simon was astonished, as well as all those with him, at what has just happened, that is, the catch of fish. James and John are then identified as the partners with Simon Peter of 5:7. Having introduced a number of people, the focus now returns to Simon Peter. Jesus responds with a standard response to the divine appearance: do not be afraid. As we have seen in the divine appearance narratives already in the Gospel, at 1:13, 1:30, and 2:10. Then, in a rather interesting turn of events, Jesus issues the call to Simon Peter and his companions. From now on, you will be catching human beings. This is expressed through the use of the verb zogreo, which is a compound from two words, zoos, meaning alive, and argeo, meaning to capture or to save. Thus, zorgeo means to capture or save living beings. The object of this particular verb is anthropos, which means human beings. So Jesus is inviting these fishermen to put aside their fishing gear and use their talents to capture or save living human beings. The response of Simon Peter, James, and John is to direct their boats to the land, leave everything, and follow Jesus. Again, it is important to note that the verb used for follow, akoluthao, is a technical term for discipleship in the Gospels. These men depart from everything they have known and now enter into a relationship of discipleship with this rabbi preacher Jesus. The word disciple has its origin in the Latin discipulus, which means one who is learning, from the Latin verb disco, which means to teach. So Jesus' ministry has now expanded to the point that Jesus the rabbi has called a number of followers to be his disciples, learn from him, and ultimately take over his mission. As we continue with the text of Luke chapter 5, the scene shifts to one of the towns where he was. No name is given, so it's presumed that it's one of the towns where Jesus has been preaching and healing in the preceding narratives. The main character of the scene is introduced, a man full of leprosy. Now, it should be noted that leprosy in this context is not the same as what we would know as leprosy or Hansen's disease. In the Old Testament period, almost any disease of the skin, from psoriasis to ringworm, to the more virulent forms approaching what we would call leprosy, were termed leprosy. Because of the prevalence of such diseases in the Old Testament period, there were strict guidelines laid out in chapters 13 and 14 of Leviticus for handling such situations. According to Leviticus, once a person has been determined to have the most contagious form, that person would be isolated from the community, wear tattered clothing, and be required to cry out, "Unclean, unclean," whenever anyone approached. In essence, they were ostracized from society. Upon seeing Jesus, this man falls to the ground and pleads with Jesus, realizing that Jesus has the power to release him from this dreadful situation. The leper's falling to the ground is reminiscent of Peter's falling at Jesus' knees in the preceding episode. The leper says, "Lord, if you wish, you can make me clean." This is a present general condition, which implies the strong belief that the man has in Jesus' ability to cure him. The address Lord, or Kuria, serves further to link this leper with Peter in the preceding text. As it did here, so also there, it implies that Jesus is more than just an ordinary person. Jesus' response is immediate. He stretches out his hand and touches the leper. Touching a leper could lead to contracting the disease, but Jesus' touch shows that he has authority over the disease and will show compassion to this leper. While touching him, Jesus says, "I will do it. Be clean." Jesus' words echo the request of the leper. The leprosy immediately leaves the leper. Following the cleansing, Jesus gives the cleansed leper 3 commands, which show that Jesus wants the law to be adhered to regarding the cleansing. First, he is to speak to no one. Any claim to cleansing from leprosy was inappropriate prior to the declaration by the priests that the leper was cleansed. Hence, second, the leper was to go and show himself to the priest for the declaration of cleansing, in accordance with Leviticus 13:49. And finally, he's to offer the proper sacrifice, the sacrifice prescribed by Moses, for the cleansing in accordance with Leviticus 14:2. Once the priest has declared the leper cleansed, he's brought back into the religious and social world. As a result of this healing, word travels even faster about Jesus. He has the power even to expel leprosy from a person. Upon hearing the report, the people flock to Jesus to hear what he has been saying in his teaching and to be cured of their ailments. We see the prophecy of Isaiah that Jesus proclaimed in the synagogue of Nazareth being fulfilled. People are flocking to hear the good news and to be released from the illness that has held them captive. In this last instance, the disease, leprosy, has not only held the leper captive, but also has separated him or her from society. Jesus has come to cure and reunite them with society. Jesus, for his part, withdraws to a deserted place to pray. Jesus needs to be sustained in his ministry by communion with the Father in prayer. Hence, at several moments in the Gospel of Luke, he enters into such communion. Rather than basking in the attention given to him by the people, he knows that it is not his own, but the Father's work that he has been sent to accomplish. He realizes that the mainspring of his life was in communion with God, and in such communion he has found both strength and guidance to avoid submitting to temptation. With Jesus at prayer, we leave the Gospel of Luke for this session. In the next session, we shall look at the Lucan equivalent of Matthew's Sermon on the Mount, a text known as the Sermon on the Plain, along with some more of the miracles that Jesus performs.